She showed up barely standing. What my sister-in-law did next changed everything. She was supposed to be my enemy. Instead, she saved my life and destroyed everything she had left to do it. I never thought the knock at my door at 2:47 in the morning would be the sound that split my entire world into a before and an after. But that's exactly what it was. I'm Tina Trump, Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy. 15 years of service, 3 deployments, 2 commendations, and one rule I lived by above every order ever given to me. Family is the mission that never ends. I say that now with a different weight than I used to. Because the night Maya showed up at my door, my sister-in-law, the woman I had complicated feelings about for years, barely able to stand, one hand pressed flat against my doorframe like the wood itself was the only thing keeping her upright. Blood dried at the corner of her lip. That rule became the most dangerous thing I had ever believed. She looked at me with those hollow eyes and whispered 4 words. It was my fault. And then she collapsed. Let me take you back. My brother Daniel Trump had married Maya 6 years before that night. He was Army, she was a civilian nurse. When they met, I thought she was too quiet for him. Daniel was loud, electric, the kind of man who filled every room he walked into. Maya was still water, deep and unreadable. I didn't trust still water. The Navy taught me that. Still water hides currents that will pull you under before you ever feel the tug. But Daniel loved her the way soldiers love things, completely without reservation, like she was a position he had sworn to defend. They had a son, Eli, 4 years old, bright-eyed, with Daniel's laugh and Maya's silence. The perfect, terrible combination. For 6 years everything looked fine from the outside. I was stationed in Norfolk. I visited when I could. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Eli's birthdays. Maya was always polite, always appropriate. We were cordial in the way that 2 people are cordial when they both know they are circling something neither of them has named yet. Then Daniel deployed. 7 months to the Pacific. And 4 months into his deployment, Maya called me, not to talk, not to ask for help. She called to tell me she was pregnant. I said the right things. I said congratulations. I asked how she was feeling. I asked if Daniel knew. She said yes, she had told him. She said he was happy. Something in her voice told me she was reading from a script she hadn't written. I didn't push. That was my first mistake. 3 months later, Daniel called me from a secured line at 300 my time. I knew immediately it wasn't a social call. Soldiers don't use secured lines for small talk. His voice was flat, controlled. That specific brand of control that I recognized from our father, a man who had served 30 years in the army and learned to turn grief into something you could stand on. Tina, he said, I need you to tell me what you know. About what? About Maya, about the baby. I told him I knew she was pregnant. I told him she'd called me. I told him she sounded off, but I hadn't pushed. Silence on the line, long enough that I checked the connection. Then he said, someone told me the baby isn't mine. Floor moved under me. I was standing in my kitchen in Norfolk at 3 in the morning and I felt the floor move. Who told you that? He wouldn't say. Not then, he just said, find out what's true, Tina, please, before I do something I can't take back. And then he hung up. I want you to understand something about military families before I go further. We are not like civilian families in one specific way that matters here. We have been trained, deliberately, systematically, to complete missions under emotional duress. That is both our greatest strength and our most catastrophic flaw. Because when Daniel said, before I do something I can't take back, I heard a soldier who had been handed intelligence he hadn't verified and was preparing to act on it. And I knew in the part of me that had been his big sister before I was ever an officer that I had approximately no time to find the truth. I drove 6 hours to their house in Fayetteville the next morning. Maya wasn't surprised to see me. She opened the door, looked at my face and stepped aside to let me in without a word. Eli ran to hug my knees. I held him for a moment longer than usual. Maya made coffee. We sat, and I asked her directly. Someone told Daniel the baby isn't his. I need to know if that's true. She didn't flinch, she didn't cry. She set her coffee cup down very carefully like she was placing a piece of evidence on a table, and she looked at me with those still water eyes and said, no, the baby is Daniel's. I have never been with anyone else. Then who said it? And that was the first time I saw something crack in Maya's composure. Not much, just a hairline fracture behind her eyes. I think you should ask your brother's friend, she said. Captain Reeves. Captain Marcus Reeves, Daniel's closest friend since basic training. Best man at their wedding. Godfather to Eli. I knew Marcus. Charming, ambitious, the kind of officer who collected loyalty the way some people collected debt, gratefully in the moment, dangerously over time. I drove to the base. I don't need to detail everything that happened in the conversation that followed, because some of it is still under investigation and some of it I am not proud of. What I will tell you is this: Marcus Reeves had been in love with Maya before Daniel ever met her. He had introduced them. He had stood at that altar as best man and watched Daniel marry the woman he wanted. And he had spent 6 years waiting for a fracture he could widen. When Daniel deployed, Marcus started calling Maya. Friendly at first, then less friendly. He told her things, suggested things, made implications about her fidelity that were built entirely from fiction, and delivered with the confidence of a man who had calculated exactly how much damage a lie could do when planted in the right soil. When she refused to engage, when she made it clear she wanted nothing to do with him, he escalated. He called Daniel. He told my brother that he had seen something, that he had heard something, that he was telling him as a friend, as a brother, as someone who loved him. He told my brother that the baby wasn't his. It was a lie constructed from nothing. A grenade with a 6-year fuse. I called Daniel that night. I told him everything, all of it. Silence again. Longer this time then. I already knew it might be Reeves. I just needed to hear you say it out loud. Why? Because I needed someone I trust to tell me I'm not crazy, that what I'm feeling is real. What are you feeling, Daniel? His voice broke, just once. A single fracture in all that controlled damage. Like I almost threw away the best thing I have because someone I trusted handed me a lie and called it loyalty. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 3 days. Come home, I said, come home and fix it. But that's not the end, that's not even close to the end. Because 3 weeks later Maya showed up at my door, barely standing, hand on the doorframe. Blood dried at her lip, eyes that looked like they had been looking at something terrible for too long. She whispered. It was my sister-in-law. I thought she was talking about me. I almost said, I know, I'm sorry I didn't push sooner, but she shook her head and said, no, Reeves' sister. She's the one who helped him. She got into my medical records. She found something from before Daniel, something private, and she gave it to Reeves to use. Then she collapsed. I caught her. I laid her on my couch. I called 911. While I waited, I held her hand and I made myself stay present, controlled breathing, eyes open, the way they train you to stay functional when the situation is trying to pull you under. The baby was fine. She was fine. She had driven 6 hours on no sleep, dehydrated, running on pure adrenaline, and the specific terror of a woman who has realized the enemy has access to things she thought were buried. While the paramedics worked, I stepped outside. I called Daniel. It's time, I said. He knew exactly what I meant. Because we had grown up in a military house where our father used those exact words before every hard conversation, every necessary reckoning, every moment when the truth had to come out whether it was convenient or not. Do what Daddy taught us. Our father's rule, not a military rule, a family rule. When someone you love is under attack, you don't wait for orders. You move. What followed took 11 days. Daniel came home on emergency family leave. I filed a formal complaint through JAG, the Judge Advocate General's Corps, documenting everything Marcus Reeves had done. The phone records, the calls to Daniel, the coordination with his sister to access private medical information. That last part was not just a personal betrayal. That was a federal crime. I won't pretend it was clean. It wasn't. Military justice moves in its own way at its own pace, and it does not care about your timeline or your feelings. There were depositions. There were uncomfortable hours in rooms with fluorescent lighting answering questions I hadn't prepared for. Marcus Reeves was stripped of his command. His sister was referred to civilian prosecutors. The investigation is ongoing, and Eli got a little brother, Noah Daniel Trump. 7 pounds 4 ounces, Daniel's laugh. Maya's eyes. Daniel was in the room when he was born. I know because he called me from the hospital at 4 a.m. Voice cracked open the way only new fathers and people who have just survived something impossible sound, and he said, "He's here, Tina, he's real, he's mine." And I sat on the edge of my bed in Norfolk and I pressed my hand over my mouth and I cried the way I only allow myself to cry alone, completely without reservation, the way soldiers love things. Here is what I want you to take from this. Not the drama. Not the military procedure. Not even the specific mechanics of how one man's unchecked obsession nearly destroyed a family from the inside. I want you to take this. The most dangerous lies are the ones delivered by people who have earned the right to be believed. Marcus Reeves didn't destroy my brother's marriage because he was powerful. He almost destroyed it because he was trusted. Because Daniel had handed him access to his most vulnerable places over 20 years of friendship, and Marcus had filed that access away and waited. That is not a military problem. That is a human problem. It happens in boardrooms and family dinners and group chats. It happens in the quiet spaces between people who think they are safe. The second thing I want you to take, still water is not weakness. I misjudged Maya for 6 years because she was quiet. Because she didn't perform her strength in ways I recognized. but she drove 6 hours half collapsed to make sure the truth got to someone who could do something with it. She protected her family the only way she had available to her in that moment. That is not weakness dressed up as strength, that is just strength. Undecorated, unannounced, the kind our father would have recognized immediately, the kind that doesn't need a uniform. I still think about the morning I drove to Fayetteville. The way the highway looked in early November, everything stripped down and honest, trees bare and the sky that particular grey that feels like a held breath. I think about Eli running to hug my knees. I think about Maya placing her coffee cup down with such deliberate care, like even in the middle of everything falling apart, she was going to be careful with the small things. I think about my father's voice. It's time. Do what I taught you. He taught us to move toward the hard thing. To not wait for perfect conditions or complete information or guaranteed outcomes. To move anyway with whatever you have toward the people who need you. He taught us that the mission doesn't end. It just changes shape. And he was right. He was absolutely right. If this story hit something real in you, if you recognize someone in Maya or Daniel, or even in the way Marcus Reeves weaponized trust, share this. Not for the algorithm. Not for the numbers. Share it because someone in your life might be standing at a door right now, barely standing, with a truth they don't know how to carry alone. And maybe what they need is someone who moves toward them instead of waiting to be sure. Drop a comment if Tina's story stayed with you. Drop a comment if you've ever had to do what Daddy taught you.